Okay, I think we are recording. Welcome to the Parkour Coach Companion podcast with me, Sam
Thank you.
Kopak. I'm here today with someone I really don't know very much of at all, so I'm excited to talk to him. I saw some of his stuff via Jimmy the Giant, aka Kieran Owen. He kind of shared your Instagram profile, and
Yes,
I
he did.
thought it looked really interesting. So
Thank you.
welcome Robin Link, and hopefully you guys are either listening to this on Spotify or you can also watch this on YouTube. So if you prefer to watch it, then this should be uploaded on YouTube as well. I'm thinking ahead a little bit. Cool. Okay, so Robin, how are you, sir?
Yeah, pretty good. I'm just recovering. I had a little cut in my foot because I stepped into glass the other week. But it seems to be going all right, so I should be back to training next week, and I'm excited for that.
Yeah, nice. That sounds like it's always, foot injuries are always annoying.
It's so I couldn't properly walk for like 2 or 3 days, so that sucked. But
Yeah. So just for people that don't know anything about you, including me, where are you, where are you talking from? How long have you been coaching? Who do you coach? And just
right, yeah.
tell us a bit about what you're doing.
So my name's Robin Link. I'm 24 years old. Yes, that's right. I'm from Germany, which is also where I'm located. Mannheim is the city where I live or studied. People are always confused. My dad's from England, hence the accent. So that's that. And I've been practicing for over 10 years probably and coaching for 8, I think. At the moment, with the virus going on and everything, I'm not actively coaching. Also because I just returned a couple of months ago from traveling the world on a gap year, which was exciting. That being said, I've been coaching around the world for quite a while, in Switzerland, in Germany, in Turkey, and in Australia, holding several workshops, working in gyms, doing outdoor classes, and had participants from the age of probably 6 to 8, all up until 60. So I've been doing all of that, but at the moment, I'm not really coaching. I've got holiday classes coming up, so we're opening up restrictions a little bit more in Germany, which I'm excited for. And does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Are you based with a certain coaching organization, or is it more of your own thing?
No, so the thing is, I've only learned about this last week actually. In Germany, there's no generally like there's no one certificate for coaching or one thing that accepts, because I heard in England there's the ADAPT and there's several other ones. I think the US has kind of institutionalized, well, certificates that allow you to coach. In Germany, we're not that far yet, which is blessing and a curse. So I'm not with one particular organization. I usually, when I apply to coach or people reach out to me, it's based on the experience I already have. So people will know that I'm an experienced coach, and based on that, I will get booked for jobs and coachings. So I've been helping out for several clubs and organizations, one of them being my uni, one of them being Parkour Lucerne, which is the club in Switzerland that also have built the Grandstand Park. I think that's what they're widely known for. And yeah, several others. So when I was traveling, I usually go into a parkour gym, Adelaide, Point A, or reach out to the people in Melbourne for Melbourne Parkour and then just work with them.
So you're down in
I'm
Australia
not
for a bit.
a year, yeah.
Oh, cool. Are you close with the community there?
Uh ish. Not that much. I mean, obviously given the time difference we have, it's hard to keep in touch with everyone. And coronavirus is making things worse. But I felt connected to a point, especially in Adelaide. Like I've been hanging out at Point A and with the community a lot when I was down there. But that was only a couple of weeks, unfortunately. But yeah, I know a bit what's going on. I'd say I know them better than, say, the English community, actually, just because I've met more people in person because I've been down there. I haven't been to England in over 10 years.
Yeah, yeah. So, so what was your gap year like? Did you go? Did you do that as a? Was that a coaching centered trip, or was that more of your own thing? Or
I wish I would have done that, actually, because it turned out that was also the best paying jobs I did in Australia, actually. But yeah, so the situation I was in, or I'm still in, is I finished my bachelor degree, so I studied psychology. And then after I finished everything, I realised that's not what I want to do, or at least I don't want to work with it. And so I just took a year off, really, to think about life and myself, and just went down to Australia because it's so convenient. Like, the wage is good, it's easy to get a visa, and I was mostly bartending, but obviously I'd still do parkour. And yeah, when I came back, I just decided this is what I really enjoy and really want to do. So right now I'm in the process of making it a full-time job and making a living out of that, which is, as probably everybody could tell, a challenge that needs to be tackled every day.
yeah, yeah,
But at least I feel I'm on the right path, and it's also kind of how the Instagram started. And
yeah,
um,
yeah. So let's talk about
yeah,
a bit about that because I've kind of my Instagram page is labeled as coach. So I have put out coaching video clips and resources and stuff like that. But I was really like like kind of taken in by your
yeah,
account, and
that's so cool.
I think that it's really interesting how a lot of big coaching organizations don't actually share a lot of the ins and outs of
Yeah,
coaching publicly. Um,
true.
I,
Yeah,
I guess there are different reasons for this, but I found it interesting that you kind of have these big, very easy to digest pictures
yeah, yeah,
on your posts, which you can swipe through and they're kind of linked together nicely with
yeah, yeah.
different ideas. And it's very accessible, I would say. And
Yeah.
hopefully it'll get to the right people who want to learn. So I was just wondering, I wanted to ask you more about why you decided to kind of make these types of posts, and also why you think what are the best ways of trying to encourage not only more people to get into parkour, but also to help other coaches think about coaching, essentially.
Right. Oh, big questions. All right. So yeah, so it started as a Corona hobby, actually, because I was, obviously, people in my area will know me, and they knew that I was, well, back from Australia and wanted to get back into coaching. And then all the classes were cancelled because of the coronavirus, and I was stuck at home. And I'm a big fan of the Sean Wood podcast too. Shout out Sean Wood at this point. Love your stuff. And so he had a guest on, and they talked about these they're called carousel posts. So that's when you keep swiping. And I've never heard of that, so I just checked it out because Corona, I had the time for it. And I thought, wow, it looks really cool. Somebody should do that for parkour. Nobody's done that yet. That would be a great niche. And I thought, well, then maybe I should do it. Like, nobody else was doing it. So I just did like 3. They're the very first ones on my profile. They look shit compared to the standard I have now, but everybody starts somewhere. And they took ages. Like, I think my first post, I spent like 7 hours on that. And by now it's probably an hour, which is still a bit of time. But, I mean, they look nicer and they take less time, fortunately. Um, and because people liked it so much right from the start, I kept going. And I also felt, I think I had Jason Paul on the other day, and he said, I have to try up to a certain point so I can confidently say I actually gave it a shot. So I did the first three and people liked that, and I was like, well, I should keep this going and well, at least actually try. So I'm going to make at least 100 posts. So at the moment, I'm posting Monday through Saturday every day,
Wow.
and Sunday I take off for myself.
Okay.
So that's the goal. And because people keep reaching out to me, I keep making posts and I will keep gathering ideas, which is probably the hardest part,
Mm.
but it's going well so far. And yeah, it just gives me the motivation and energy to keep it going. And so the overall goal already became to have kind of a huge library on all the knowledge I have about the sport, everything I find important for anybody really who's interested in the sport, and just have it available. And then you asked about what's important to coaches, so how we can draw more people into the sport, right?
Mm.
Yeah, so I don't think we actively need to like pull people into the sport. I feel that there is a public interest, especially in young people, mostly boys, unfortunately, to already do this sport. I feel what most people lack is an opportunity to actually try, because I remember when I first heard about parkour when I was like, 13, 14, there was no coaches, there was no gyms, there was no option of learning that really.
Mm.
It was just you watched the 3 videos there were, went out and did your jumps. And that's how you learned. Or there was this like one forum or stuff like that. And then and that was great. But I feel now we have the infrastructure, we have gyms, we have people that have been in in the sport long enough to actually coach and give the right input. I feel it's very important to make that available, and I think that will make us grow as a sport and culture. It's just that, like, living that parkour life, traveling, being out there, producing videos. I think is an important part, because how are going to people notice what you're doing if you don't put it out there?
Mm.
And as for coaches, I feel like I've just got into coaching because I was an experienced free runner when I started traveling. So my mother lives in Switzerland. So when I was training out there, people were actually approaching me and they were like, "Oh, we're doing the same thing. Do you want to join us?" And I went, "Yeah, sure." And because I was more experienced than them, it happened that I'd become a coach just at the regular jams happening every week. But I don't think that would be the best way to, well, become a coach nowadays, because obviously there is a lot of structure, there's a bit of knowledge involved too. And just because I went through the experience, which also takes a lot longer, I imagine it would be beneficial to have, well, like coaching workshops, because that also ensures that the knowledge that you're giving away is not only that coach's personal experience, but something that's kind of legit, that where the parkour culture stands behind, and we're like, well, this is how we want to teach it. And obviously the sport is very free, and I always tell my students, well, as long as you feel right with it and it works for you, that's at least not wrong.
Mm.
But I feel there should be standards to becoming a coach. And as far as I know, there are in several countries, just not Germany at the moment. So we should work on that.
Yeah. And just for those that are listening or watching, all the links to Robin's stuff will be down in the description. But I believe on Instagram, you're at Robin the Coach.
Exactly. Yeah.
At Robin the Coach. So yeah, you can even go and look at the posts while you're listening to this and have a flick through, because they're really worth having a look. And I just like how accessible they are. So here's a question. So did you say you're trying to do 100 of these?
Yeah.
Yeah. So at least, yeah. So when you get to number 100, and you have this massive kind of compendium of swipeable carousel posts.
Yeah.
Do you think that one thing I've talked about with a lot of coaches is the idea of syllabuses. So the idea of like an actual guide, like kind of guidebook to how to teach parkour. So do you think that maybe having 100 posts, presented, it could help not only yourself but maybe other people start to form these types of syllabuses which don't really exist that much as
Yeah.
far as I know. Yeah. What do you think about that?
So, as a matter of fact, I know that some coaches around the world are apparently, or that's what they're telling me at least, sharing my page. So, if they've got beginners coming into class and they're going to tell them, like, oh, look at Robin the coach's stuff, which I find amazing. And that, because obviously there's no, like, I don't make money from that or anything. It's just giving back to the community and growing the culture is what I do this for. But it's also very handy because even at the point I'm at now, and I'm not big at all, people reach out to me and they're like, how do I get into flips? And I've already made a how to learn flips. So I could just send them this post and save time. So I think it's a great resource, and having all the knowledge available in whatever way is always good, because I remember we had trickstutorials.com, which is Jujimufu's old page, and I think it still exists, and the tutorials are still up to date and great. Obviously you could go through YouTube as well, but as long as we have different resources available and they're consistent and understandable and right, I feel that's a great way of promoting the culture and educating coaches and students alike.
And how would you feel if, say, you made one of these posts and another coach kind of criticized what you were writing and what you were putting out?
Yeah. So that
Has that
kind
happened?
of happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, Scott Bass criticised my How to Be Last in Parkour article, which is fair enough, because he criticised the idea, saying that new athletes burn out faster than older athletes, which I agree. But then at the same time, I kind of wanted to put that article out there, that How to Be Into Last article by Blaine, and just make it available, because I feel it's not talked about a lot anymore, and I feel it's still relevant. But if people want to criticize me, that's perfectly fine, because as I said, all the knowledge I put out there is just my experience, and that's something I try to put out every time I make a post. Like, people ask me, how do I recover from injury? I'll tell them I'm not a doctor. This is only what I know. And obviously I've only got 10 slides, 8 to be precise, because the opening and the end slide are always the same. I need to compress a lot of information and things and really simplify them in order to put it in such a format. And the great thing is it's easily digestible, and people like it, and it's nice to look at, but also a lot of information gets lost. I guess what I'm trying to say is, feel free to criticize my stuff, and if a discussion arises from what I do, I'm happy to have that discussion. I make these posts with certain thoughts and things in mind. So I'm like, this is the point I want to get across. And if there's things to add or discuss about, message me. Let's have that discussion. This is and has always been how the sport grows, how we can agree and have a consensus on what's right or wrong, or how we want to teach the sport, is only by sitting down and having those discussions. So I actually encourage that. I love it when people ask me, they're like, how do I do this? Is that right? Somebody said this in another way, or somebody disagrees with that. I'm happy to have that discussion. And also, it's perfectly fine to have another opinion too, because some things it's just how I feel.
Yeah. And on that basis, have you been taught how to coach by other people? Have you had influencing coaches, or is it more something that you've developed through your own training, through training with others, through traveling, etc.? Has there been any like influences in your journey, I guess?
Yeah, definitely. So I've never been properly taught, as in a way like, oh, you're gonna become a coach, we're gonna have classes and sit down and teach you how to do it. But since I had the privilege to be able to travel quite a lot and attend a lot of workshops too, so as a student myself, I kind of made this gist, which I'm going to make a post about this week, actually, next week, um, which I base my training on, but it's mostly being attending other classes, talking to other coaches, discussing what they're doing, what I do, educating myself about what makes sense and what doesn't in terms of sports science mostly. But yeah, no, I have no formal education on this. It's just purely experience, really.
Mm. I guess there's quite a lot of there's some quite big splits in the coaching community because you have some people who are competent coaches and they are very good at outlining the basics of coaching and what needs to be taught and how it should be taught. And you also have people like Flynn Disney and Ollie Thorpe, who you may or may not know, who are super like into the detail and the more highbrow ways of thinking with movement, with body mechanics, with mindset, with
Yeah.
physiology. So it's interesting that we have these different strands. But as I said before, what I like about your post is that there isn't until I saw them, I haven't really come across many people who are doing what you're doing and making these basic and very important messages about parkour more accessible. So yeah, I think it's really good, man. I think you're doing good stuff. And I was going to say as well, yeah, I don't really know. I went to Munich in 2015, I think, on a big trip. I went with like 9 other UK lads, and it was an amazing trip. I'll link that down in the description as well. We made a video on that one, and we had a great time. And we really found the people we trained with. People like Silke. Who else do we train with?
Yep.
We trained with. Shout out to I've forgotten his name. I've forgotten his name. It'll come to me. It'll come to me. We trained with a few people, and we had
Right.
Jacob. We saw Endis as well a little bit, and we had a great time. And we were really impressed with how welcoming the community was, but also just how hardworking they were. They just never
Yeah.
seemed to stop. So I wanted to ask you how you feel about the German parkour community, and also about, I know you kind of touched on the coaching community, but if you could explain a little bit more about that and maybe who you coach with or people that you think are good coaches in Germany.
So, I think the German parkour community is great for a couple of reasons. We've been lucky enough. So I've been lucky enough. I grew up close to Frankfurt, which is where Jason Paul's from, and they had weekly workshops running. So that was probably the first time I got in touch with coaching, but I was being coached at that time. And so that's been going on for years actually before Jason moved to Bangkok and like had this crazy traveling episode. And but the original team that he was a founder of, the Ashigaru, they still exist. I mean, most of the team has changed by now, but they've really been on the forefront of presenting parkour to the German public, and the first successful people to successfully make a living out of that. And they are also great at giving back. So they build parks, have the jams and stuff like that. And I really feel it's a great community to be in. Obviously, we're in a first world country too. We're given all the opportunities we want to have, but I feel there's loads of events going on. From the early days I started, there's been jams all over Germany. We had gyms quite early on too. They've improved a lot, but we had them. And yeah, also because we're close to England, we kind of have the precision. So we're a bit like arrogant about technique and landings and stuff, but we're also, yeah, so we're kind of in the melting pot of this like Spanish, doing big reverses, and then we'll Russia and Eastern Europe is not that far, so people get into flips and twists. So I always felt it was a bit of a melting pot of the styles. And obviously people come through Germany quite a lot, so we have a lot of visitors. So it's a great community, actually. And I've also spoken to people, like even in Australia, that came to Germany. They were like, oh, it was great travel. It was great parkour. It's a great community. So yeah, thumbs up from me.
Nice.
And
Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, so about the coaching, as I just mentioned, so coaching's been going on forever in one form or another, which I think is great. There's also, especially around the Frankfurt area, there's no real like workshops in that form. It's more everybody comes together and trains, and if you want to know how something works, you'll just approach that person and ask, and 99% of the time they'll be like, explain it to you or practice it with you or support you in your training, which I think is a really important skill, because you can hire a coach and have somebody tell you what to do, but I think a real mastery of this sport is knowing yourself and how you progress. And once you understand how things work, being able to push yourself to the point where you're able to make that move. And yeah, I'm not, as I told you, associated with anyone coaching really. I'm just me, apparently. It's Robin the coach. But yeah, I'm also not that well known in the, like, even in the German community. I'm kind of an underdog, because especially when I studied, I kind of disappeared, and the scene in my city, especially during my studies, was small. So there was not much going on. That's changed because we have a parkour gym that's opened up. That's small too, so it's mostly children practicing there, which is great. But I feel kids from the age 6 to say 13, 14 don't build the culture. I think it's when you turn 15, 16, you go out, you travel, you meet people.
Interesting point. Mm.
Obviously we need the next generation, but I feel like when you turn, say, 15, 16, 17, 18, that's where you're able to push and actually change a lot of things. Like you're able to do your own jobs, coachings, travels, your video production is probably at another level, and you just have more leverage to push the culture, really.
That's a good point. I've not really thought about it in that way. I guess one thing that I've learned with coaching is that, to begin with, I just thought that parkour was for everyone, and I thought that everyone could do.
It definitely is. Don't get me wrong. Like,
No, sorry.
it's amazing that children start parkour at such a young age, and like many of them progress very fast. I'm super excited to see where they are going, because they have all the support, they have all the gyms, they have coaches, and I mean the rate we're developing the sport and progress is unbelievable, and it's super exciting to see where we're going to be in 5, 10, 15 years down the line.
Yeah. But I was going to say that I then realized that it's not for everyone, and as in there's only so much that I can do as a coach that will help people get into parkour, that will keep them doing parkour, and that will help them progress. And to begin with, I really thought like everyone can do this, and I should make everyone an amazing parkour practitioner. And I think that's a good point in the age, because there's definitely, as a coach, you have to get used to the idea that there's going to be people who you like, or that are fun to be around, or that are talented, and they may end up stopping, or they may end up doing something else. And it can be difficult, because you want more than anything for them to become something amazing, because you can see the potential. But you have to stay leveled, and you have to stay understanding that that it can't always be like that. And so I think that's a good point about the age, that kind of like tipping point age of 14, 15. That's when I started. I wasn't coached by anyone, but that's when I started, and I was gaining some independence, so I could go and train by myself. I started to understand my body was changing a lot anyway, just as an adolescent. So that meant that my gains were like massive year on year, and I was like, whoa, okay. So it's a really exciting
Yeah.
time. It's a really exciting time to I guess I think you're right. I think maybe you can become a part of the bigger community, and I guess it's just helping as a coach, just helping people, just guiding them there, but not being set that they have to get there. You have to understand
Yeah.
that some people are going to drop off. But that's a cool
I've
point, man. Um,
I've heard these rumors actually when the Yamakasi started training, so they were taught by David Bell that he actually always told them, "You can always go home, you know, like, but you don't have to come back then." He's like, "I'm going to buy you a croissant too, but you don't need to show up anymore." So um, I feel it's very important. That probably could come across very arrogant, where you're like, "You don't need to finish this. That's all right, but you know, I never want to see you again if you don't." Um, but I feel it's very important to anyone to leave it open to them if they want to do that and progress. And I feel that's something everybody needs to think about. Is this what I want to do in life? Is this where I want to go? Do I want to go? And I think that's what makes parkour worth it, or it's worth it for me. And I decide that every day. It's like I want to go through the work. I want to go through the conditioning, like the strains I put on myself, the possible injuries, the parkour culture and the love for movement makes it worth it for me every day to push through that. But at the same time, this is my passion, not necessarily another person's. So I need to be understanding as a coach, I feel, of people not wanting to push that hard, and they're like, oh, this is just a hobby for me. Like, parkour is my life. It's what I define as is a parkour practitioner. Like many decisions in my life are shaped by the way of thinking and adapting to things, and parkour has given me strength to deal with loads of obstacles in my life. It's like more psychological than physical, really. But I feel that's not for everyone. If you're living a happy life playing chess, go ahead and do that. I couldn't, but I feel what I try to signal as a coach is, if you want to learn, this is what I do. I'm here to help and help you progress up to a point.
mm.
And I can be strict. I will tell people, well, you need to do the conditioning. Like, if you want to get better, if you want to get bigger jumps, do your workouts. But then if people don't, I'll be like, well, that's all right. I'm not going to hate you for it. And if people drop out, that's fine too. Like, I feel at the end of the day, the most important thing is that you're happy. And for me, that would be doing parkour every day. But for other people, that's not. And that's fine.
I think the main kind of pillars of parkour are potential and progress. Like as
Right.
in
Yeah.
coaches are just like searching for this potential in the people they
Yeah.
teach. And we, in some ways, in doing parkour, are trying to just keep chipping away at this potential so that we can understand who we were a year ago is not the same person that stands here today. I think that's one of the amazing
Yeah.
things about the practice, and you do see that change. I was going to ask you, I found it interesting that you said that you studied psychology
Yeah.
as an undergrad. Was that something that, do you find that's something that's had links with your parkour practice as well, or is that something that's more just of interest or something you're good at? Or
Well, unfortunately, how am I going to explain this? So, I was very good in high school, like very, very good. And so in Germany, there's four kind of elite studies that people expect you to do when you're doing very well in high school, which are law, medicine, psychology. I think it's actually just three.
okay.
Actually gone to do. And I was always super into sports science. Just finished my PT certification actually. But I was kind of considered too good to actually do that, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So they were like, "Oh, it's a waste. Like, look at how well you did in high school. Do you just want to go into sports science?" And I went, maybe not. So I thought I'll try psychology. If it's too hard, I don't like it, I can still go back and do it. And then looking back at it, I realized I didn't enjoy it that much. It was interesting, but I realized it's not what I want to work in, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just was never hard enough to actually consider quitting. So I kind of just slipped through
Okay.
without putting too much work into it. And now I've finished it. That being said, there are useful skills in psychology for anyone. How motivation works, how your brain works, how you remember things, how you learn different things. Learning is probably a big one, but I don't feel it had a huge impact on how I coach or train, or probably not as much as anybody expect. Like very, very, very little.
Hmm. That's fine. Yeah, I think one of the reasons why I wanted to ask you is because I went through a similar process. I'm 26 now. I'm a bit ahead of you, but I did a,
Well, yeah,
as in, yeah, I'm older than you. I did a
yeah, but I mean, 2 years. That's not a lot. But go on.
surprised. You'd be surprised. But
We'll talk again in 2 years, and I'll tell you about it.
yeah, um, but yeah, I did my undergrad in environment and sustainability. So I did like an
Right.
environmental science degree, and for me, it was quite linked with parkour because I doing parkour meant that I was outside more than most people, and
Right.
being
Yeah.
outside, and I grew up in a very small village in the countryside. Um, being around, being in nature a lot, and thinking about my environment
Yeah.
actually made me want to protect it and want to look into how we protect it. So that's one of the reasons I did my environmental degree. But in a similar way to you, I finished my degree and then wasn't motivated to go into a job in that field, and
Yeah.
with the feeling that parkour is always going to be just tapping me on the side of the head. It's always going to
Yeah.
be there. Like I can't. I feel like parkour is kind of the backbone of my life in a similar way that you've said,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I felt that if I went into something to do with my degree, then I'd be kind of ignoring and suppressing that kind of desire to
Mm.
want to continue doing parkour and continue engaging in the community. So for me, the only I'm not good enough to be a sponsored athlete or anything. I never really wanted to be a
Yeah.
study.
Yeah. Same.
Realize I like teaching, and I like seeing people progress. So coaching was something for me that was the
Yeah.
the obvious route. But it's not easy, is it? It's difficult. Coaching.
Yeah.
And I was gonna ask you. You mentioned before about unfortunately, parkour is predominantly practiced by young men. And
Yeah.
I was going to ask you about your experience teaching different ages and different
Yeah.
genders, and how
Yeah.
you found that.
Well, I love teaching anybody because I feel I can give a bit of my passion to another person, especially if they're responsive. Say, if people show up because they want to show up, and I can teach them a thing, and they go home and they're like, "Oh, I learned something," or "I'm happy." That is what gives me satisfaction. So I'm always excited to coach, but obviously there's a huge difference if you're coaching a 60-year-old and you need to adapt your training to that. So when training, say, kids up to 12, 13, depending on how mature they are, I feel it's mostly coaching needs to be very playful. You can't push them to do things they don't like, and everything needs to be gamified
Mm.
in a way. And that's great because I feel it's very important for children nowadays, probably even more than 10, 20, 30 years ago to connect with that playfulness and that love for movement and moving, because everybody's so addicted to their screens, you know, like people don't move as much anymore in my perception. I see it in my cousin who's 10 years younger than me. He came down to Australia from Germany. We went camping and he was like, the Wi-Fi here is shit. And I went, well, yeah. And he wouldn't move. I was like, do you want to take a walk? He was like, no, I want to watch this YouTube video.
Interesting.
Fair enough. So that's very different. And I like doing that, but oftentimes I feel I'm just playing with them and it's just something they do to, well, pass the time. They're not that keen on learning or doing the progress, or it doesn't necessarily have to be parkour, right? So you could probably let them play football or anything else. And that's cool, you know. If it's parkour and they hang around with me, I'm fine to do that. But I feel when people get older, they oftentimes become more serious about the practice because there's a higher level of reflection on why they're doing this. And I enjoy that. So I really enjoy having, say, 13 if they're mature, 14 to 18-year-olds, because they will listen and they will probably acknowledge my experience in another way than the kids will. So I feel that's where I can actually coach, because it's one thing is obviously teaching the moves and making them progress, but the other thing is also, which I feel, giving your experience to the other people, and that could be you're hitting puberty, you're finishing school, you need to think about what you want to do in your life, and I feel that's parkour can be a very beautiful tool to connect and bond with the younger generation, but also prepare them for the things that lie ahead. Because let's be honest, 16 to say 20 is one hell of a time. It's super confusing, and so yeah, obviously that's different. And it's obviously coaching girls, because you asked about different genders. I didn't coach many just because it's a predominantly male sport so far, and I'd actually like that to change, because there's no argument against women in the sport. Obviously it's very physical and the strength helps, but we've got incredible female athletes nowadays that prove that you can perform at a level as high as male athletes. Obviously they move a little bit different, and I feel, well, you know, do things in a little bit more female way, but there's nothing wrong in that. And I love seeing female athletes, especially because they're a good motivation and a good role model for other girls, where I feel, and I mean, I'm a boy, I've always identified as one, I can only go from my imagination, but I'd imagine if I'd see loads of guys, young men, do parkour, the question would arise, can I as a girl do it? But now that we have more girls in the sport, we have female competitions, there are role models that prove, yes, you can, and I actually love to see that, because I feel parkour is for everybody. And I said, I've trained with people over the years, over the age of 60. So obviously, you're still able to do it. You need to adapt your practice. Obviously, you're going to be a lot more careful. You need to do more maintenance. But that's another thing. We can still share the love for movement and the things we appreciate about the sport and connect with another through that. And I feel that's why it's super important to promote the sport in any way and not make it look like an elite, limited thing to people in their, say, teens and 20s and like super physical. If you want to go very, 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 very elite and want to become a sponsored athlete, it's going to be super hard. You're probably going to only do it when you're a teenager to your 20s, and then you need to do something else. That's right. But that doesn't mean you can't do it, or you can't start, or you can't progress. And I feel that's the most important message there is. Parkour is for everybody. If you want to do it, you can. There will be a way. I mean, that's what this sport's about. There is always a way. Sometimes it needs more work, but like the obstacle is the way, and you'll find a way. You'll find your way eventually if you commit to the work.
Mhm. And do you think that it's the responsibility of men to help make parkour more accessible to women? Because, for example, not many, just as a very small example, on Instagram, I
Yeah.
don't think many people share a lot of things that the girls.
Goals with, yeah.
And
Yeah.
one thing that I've been focusing on more is trying to shed more light on the girls in parkour that I think are doing really good stuff from
Yeah.
different places, and just trying to have it as a rule in my head that I want to be, if I'm sharing stuff that from guys that I really like, I should try and be looking at girls stuff as well, and just
Yeah,
trying
absolutely.
trying to do that. Do you think that we need to take more responsibility in doing this?
It's a bit of a hard one because um, I can encourage girls up to a point, but then again, I'm not one. So if I tell them, yeah, you can do it, it's possible, they ask me how, I can only explain it up to a point, I imagine, but I've never experienced being a girl doing parkour. That being said, um, I've heard girls do a better job at promoting that, and the girls in the sport are doing great at the things they're doing, like traveling, holding workshops, putting out footage. Um, I can't really say if anybody has more responsibility or less responsibility. I just feel we need to at least acknowledge the fact that anybody can do parkour and appreciate every practitioner in their own way. Like for me, if I watch, say, Dom doing a crazy front flip gap or a crazy, front flip drop, obviously that impresses me. But if I see somebody just starting out and they put their first video on there, I'll still be encouraging. I'll be like, that's cool, you rock. Like if you do that and there's like a 3 months progression, I see that, it amazes me in the same way. And I feel people should be aware of that. Not everybody is going to be an elite athlete, but you should try to appreciate everybody moving in their own ways, because at the end of the day, we're doing the same thing and we're doing it because it's fun and we like it. So we should be supportive of anybody doing it.
Hmm. Okay, so we are kind of moving on to the later part of the session now. I wanted to ask you
Right.
more about yourself. I wanted to ask you about your own training. I know you said you were injured with the
Yeah.
glass foot incident. But how do you see your journey in parkour, and what are the things that you're hoping to achieve?
So, my journey had its ups and downs. I started out um, very fast, progressing very fast, doing loads of things. I was lucky enough to, well, become a coach early on, travel, did shows, and that was a great time. And then it was time to go to uni. And then I'd still do jumps, but there was not many people around my city, or at least no one I really knew that was actively training. So, well, I had my uni coaching course, and that was fine. But I was very quiet. I didn't go to jams anymore or attend events because it was just me and I wasn't motivated to do it. And that fortunately changed again pretty much during my gap year, or especially when I came back, where I was in a position to be declined for my masters and kind of working day jobs. And I was like, I have no money. I'm not. I'm struggling. So maybe I should just do something I really like then, because this is a shit situation to be in anyway. So I thought, well, do parkour. That's what you love, and you can't change the situation anyway, because I can only apply now. So there's like this gap I needed to fill, and I was like, well, I can't just go back to Australia and traveling again. Might as well just do that. And at the moment, my training consists of a lot of strength training, actually, because I actually enjoy lifting a lot. as it turns out. So I still do a lot of parkour, but at the moment I'm trying to beat my personal records by the end of the year. Lift 200 kilos, squat 200 kilos, and row 100. And I might be able to do it.
What in 200? That's
Insane,
Insane,
yeah.
yeah.
that's a lot. Yeah, yeah,
But yeah, it's a fun thing I like, and it actually helps my everyday training a lot, taking impact better, jumping further. So that's that. And so at the same time, I'm trying to really just enjoy myself out there training, but keep progressing. So I've got a few challenges that I want to tick off in my city here, especially like, fat positions and stuff like that. So that's what I was always into. I'm not that good at twists and flips. I can do most of them, but I'm not that good at it. I'm more of a parkour purist,
yeah.
Kind
kind
of.
of.
I get you.
And yeah, I guess it's the same goal as everyone. Master the sport. So I love being very precise in my jumps. I love having a lot of control over my moves and being able to move freely. So that's always a focus. But I don't, to my shame, have a list like written out at the moment where I'm like, oh, this is what I want to achieve by next week or the next 2 weeks, especially with the injury right now.
Yeah, sure. And so, going ahead with your practice, like over your 20s, do you
Yeah.
feel like do you feel there's a pressure to try and do things that you might not be able to do in 10 or 15 years time, or do you just feel comfortable in making progress however it comes?
I mean, obviously, you'll need to think about maintenance at some point. I've had struggled with inflammation in both my shoulders for the last 2 years, which I'm only, getting in control of at the moment. And obviously, knees, on and off, a little bit of pain. So I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about longevity a lot, which is also why I lift, which is also why I do lots of stretches and all the maintenance work, black rolling, stuff like that. I don't believe in progressing at whatever the cost is, but rather I just love what I do. Honestly, like I just love parkour, and I think if you've practiced for a while, you're going to realize that progression comes in waves. So you'll have a very good session or a very good week where you're feeling strong and things go your way. But you also have to realize there will be weeks or even years where that's not going to be the case. You'll struggle with an injury or you need to take care of that.
Mm.
And I feel once you accept that, you can focus on what's ahead of you. So if I injure myself, I'm like, well, I need to rest for 2 weeks. That's what I'm going to do. I need to do rehab for 3 months. I'm just going to go through with it. And I enjoy the process of it so much. So that's about my training. Long term for parkour and my role in it, obviously I'd love to be able to coach full time, maybe own a gym and just be able to keep giving back to the community, because I feel having a gym is a great way to connect with the community, bring people together, draw new people into the sport, and keep shaping the culture, keep pushing the parkour lifestyle, and just making or enabling people to progress, or even being able to provide jobs in the sport would be one of my personal goals, because I feel if people can and want to live off the sport, I'd love to be able to enable you to do that. Like if people want to dedicate their life in a sense to this course, because for me it's bigger than myself. It's a higher course. This culture and this sport is something I really want to push as far as I can.
Mm.
So obviously I'm not the best athlete, and I'm probably gonna become worse with age. Like, I'm not going to be able to do the same jumps, but that's all right. I just want to be involved with the sport and push it. And I feel right now there's many people proving that you don't need to be the best athlete or coach or sports person to still have an influence. Might that be making a parkour brand, owning a gym, being a manager, because let's be honest, parkour people suck at managing money or time, or
Yeah,
that's cool too. Like, if you're good with that, do that, because we need that. We really do.
that is a good point. I think there is a lot of, because parkour is very individualistic and because it takes a lot of hard work, I feel like we concentrate a lot on the movement and a lot on progress, and we could probably improve on things like organization, management. Uh,
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, that's. I mean, that's another reason why I started the channel. I was like, well, that would be cool, and I thought, what, somebody should do it. I'm like, well, you are somebody.
yeah,
Do that. Give back. You're like, oh, we really need this gym in our area. Well, then go ahead, build one. And you know, like, that's progress too. That's might not be your personal progress. You're not going to be able to throw another move, but if you focus on the bigger picture of the sport, everything you give back to the community is a personal progress.
mm, mhm. I like that. Yeah, and just out of interest, who are the people that have influenced you the most? I know that Jason Paul is a large. Well, do you think he's shaped the German parkour culture?
Definitely, yeah. He was on the forefront of it. Yeah, absolutely. He and his team, the Ashigaru, yeah, 100%. So that definitely. I'd actually, and his Maslich, shout out to him, who's the owner of the Ashigaru nowadays,
Mm,
has shaped me in a lot of ways of how I think about training, practice, longevity, pushing the sport, because he's done so much for the German and I think the overall parkour culture, that he's definitely a huge influence on my life. And then obviously coming from or being, well, getting into the sport 10 years ago, obviously all the other Chris Rowett was another big influence, like all the discussions about dilution, about longevity, about the sport, the philosophy behind it, um, are things that have shaped me and my practice.
mm, hmm. Cool. And is there any before we go? Is there anyone that you think that I should have on the podcast next, or any shout outs that you want to give?
Shout out to Giles, Sean, and Dom for sharing my stuff. That has been a head start for my page, so um, that definitely needed to be said. You're all legends doing the stuff you're doing, each in their own way. But yeah, it's all awesome what you're doing. Um, Maybe reach out to Ennis. I know he's super busy all the time, but he's great. He's a person that, oh, he's a character, and he's been pushing this sport, living off the sport for almost 10 years now. So very successfully too. So that would be very interesting. Maybe not from a coaching perspective, but from a business one. So
Hmm. Cool. Okay. Well, I think we will actually. No, there's one more thing I want to ask you. If
yeah, go ahead.
if if people are thinking of coming to Germany for a trip,
Yeah,
hopefully when they can,
awesome.
um, where would you recommend, and why? I guess.
So I have to confess, I didn't do much parkour traveling in Germany, so I'm probably not the best person to speak to. That being said, Enders is from Münster, which is supposed to have great spots. I've only seen pictures, but that looks amazing. Berlin is very good because many people, like, the scene there is very good. The spots are very good. Frankfurt, just for the scene and the community, is, I'd say, the go-to spot, the go-to city to travel. While you're up there, Mannheim, so my city, is only an hour away. And it is very well known for the spots we have. They're actually some of the best in Germany, I'd say.
Mm.
So, and it's all very dense. So you can, just come here by train, walk around in a day, kind of see all the spots, have a great training session, and then go wherever you want or stay for a couple of days. It's definitely worth doing that. And it would promote our scene, which would be great. And then Munich, obviously.
Yeah, cool. Okay, well, thank you very much, Robin. Again,
No problem.
people who are listening or watching, you can follow Robin at Robin the Coach on Instagram. Are there any other links or anything you want to give a quick plug to?
No, listen, buy Parkour clothes, support the community, listen to all the podcasts there are, Sean Wood, Motors, I love those. That's pretty much all I have to say.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for listening, everyone, and thank you, Robin.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Cheers.